And that particular story of Douala, and of course a raft of other stories that you run for you in regard to voter registration, we're asking you this morning, do you hail the just concluded voter registration as a success? Do you hail the just concluded voter registration as a success? You can hit us on Twitter. AM Live NTV is a Twitter handle, AM Live NTV is a profile name on Facebook, and 20505 our SMS portal. We have created First Time this morning with Professor Nyong'o, who is a senator from Kisumu. Also, we have Dr. Agnes Zani. She is the General Secretary of ODM and nominated senator, and also Dr. Shem Ochodo, who is a global leader of Kenya Diaspora Alliance. We are eagerly waiting for Farah Malim and also Alice Wahome to join us much later in the course of the program. But let's just begin with the guests that we have this morning, especially from the diaspora side. If we may begin with you, Dr. Shem Ochodo, because last week you were a frustrated person as well in regard to how the voter registration for the diaspora was going, because we were given to understand only Uganda, only Rwanda, Burundi, and
Tanzania,
and
South
even
Africa.
maybe Namibia, right? But right now, so what is the outcome? You're moving to court?
Yes, we
yes.
are, Debal. This week we're going to court.
Oh.
I'm even more frustrated now because we have latest reports as of last night from Johannesburg. They are told that IEBC will arrive on Tuesday. One would have assumed that they would have been on the spot by now to start registering people today from, I think, 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. In Uganda, the reports we have is that there are 8 IEBC officials who have arrived, but they're insisting that people will only use the national ID, which then doesn't make sense. In fact, the people in Uganda are saying you'd rather have taken this registration to Europe or America, where people have passports. We also have reports from Tanzania. They were told they'll start registering people today in Dar es Salaam.
Yes.
But from Arusha, there seems still to be challenges of proper office because we only have a small mission in Arusha. We're waiting for reports from Bujumbura and from Kigali. But by and large, that doesn't spell a very good picture. When we last met the IEBC chairperson, he did say that they were expecting regulations to be amended so that the Article 37 in the electoral regulations,
yes,
which says that people who in the diaspora must use only passports, valid passports, that's constitutional, that they were going to ask for that to be amended. We do know that the Constitution is very clear. It says either a national ID or passport. In fact, it doesn't even talk of a valid passport, meaning theoretically, anybody with a passport, even if that passport has expired, would be able to register.
Yes.
But we are not being that dogmatic. Our premise is that as long as somebody is a Kenyan and has a national ID or a passport, a valid passport, should be able to register. So we still have issues, and we are heading back to court.
All right, let's hear from Professor Nyong'o. Are you also frustrated with how the registration has been ongoing so far? Because also we saw you expressing your frustration from Kisumu as well.
Well, I think my frustration was based on the fact that most people did not have IDs in order to register. And I think this is the failure of the state more than the IEBC. I think the IEBC registration has always been assumed to be continuous. And if it continues, people could only go there if they had IDs. And I think going forward, really, as Shem says, there's no need having provisions in the Constitution which are then not respected either by the state or state organs charged with implementing these provisions. I don't think Parliament can be faulted for passing appropriate laws to ensure that these things are done. I think more it is the state and the ability of the state to respect the Constitution, which is failing Kenyans. And I hope that we learn a big lesson from this election, which is really the first election giving the state enough opportunity and time to prepare itself. You could say that in 2013, Schedule 5 was still being implemented. Laws were new, but at the time we went to election in 2013,
yes,
Schedule 5 provisions had more or less 3/4 been put in place. And with regard to the IEBC, there's really no excuse whatsoever. But I would say that the Hassan IEBC was much more preoccupied with rent-seeking and corruption than with fulfilling its mandate. That was one of the reasons why the new IEBC inherited a difficult situation. That IEBC was concerned with two things. One, protecting the president and deputy president from the IECC, And secondly, rent-seeking corruption. That is his legacy. I don't think that when Hassan writes his biography, he would say anything qualitatively different from what I'm saying, if he's honest.
Yes.
So they have left Kenyans down. I think it was a big shame that they were given a big golden handshake when they were going. In my own opinion, they should have ended in a much worse situation than that. But anyway, that is now water under the bridge. Let's look forward. Let's hope that from now on we shall have an IEBC, which is a real IEBC.
But is it truly water under the bridge? Because right now also we see the court has moved and declared that particular contractual agreement they had also.
No, I'm not saying so much that what they did, but that particular commission, it is gone, okay? But it's misdeeds.
But the blowback of it,
yeah, I mean,
them staying in the office.
It's misdeeds. Staying in office and doing things it ought not to have done is now affecting us. I think, and it was doing that because it was procurement. Realize that they decided to procure services when they were out of office, which they shouldn't have. And I'm sure that when investigations are done, you'll find that they were procuring services because of what they are getting out of it. I mean, it was an extremely wicked IEBC, and what I'm saying is water under bridge is only water under bridge in terms of fact the individuals physically are gone, but their deeds and misdeeds are still with us, and I think we have inherited a terrible situation.
Right. Well, reliable information also informs us that still these commissioners, they're still at Anniversary Towers. They've been given an office so far, and they're conducting also businesses for IEBC, so to speak. I don't know how this has not been really confirmed, but of course from reliable sources as well. I don't know if you're privy to this particular information that the chair and some of officials, the ex-chair and some of officials are still there at Anniversary Towers.
You see, whether they're there physically or not, they were given enough time to do a lot of damage. And now we have a new IEBC that has come on board that really is trying to create a new chapter, but within a context of very many things that seems to have already been done. You're coming up with an IEBC that as we go into voter registration, you're finding the issue of multiple registration. You're finding an IEBC where, as the figures are being given, we're not getting a clear sense of the figures of the people who registered before at 2012. So there's a lot that is happening which is behind the scene, which is worrying for Kenyans. Because the reason why, one, it's very clearly stipulated in the Constitution that the IEBC must be independent, is that they must be able to run their affairs without any particular arm directly giving them direction. And this is the sense of things that seem to be happening over and over again. And this creates a real situation that puts people into not having as much confidence in IEBC as they ought to be able to have in IEBC. If they run their affairs in an independent manner, then it's possible to do that. Coming back to the issue of the diaspora, for example, and the issue that this clearly stipulated in Article 37, the use of passports, then now we find that is changed suddenly. They're talking about the need to use IDs, for example. We have a constitution because it's important for us to set the laws. Now we are going into elections. We have about 5 months only to an election with an IEBC where so much has gone in, whether the Hassan team is physically out or physically there, I guess to me is neither here nor there, because they still seem to have influence, and they already put so many things into place. And this is what we were saying as a coalition at that time, COD, that let us have these people out of there and let other people come in. We are getting into an election 5 years, in 5 months, with an IEBC that had exactly 4 years to plan all this. We are going into issues of the diaspora vote as though we realized yesterday morning that the diaspora will be voting. We knew this from the word go. And if we are going to arbitrarily put 5 countries, for example, that is going to create a complication, 1. And 2, even the sense that we have other countries, for example, Uganda and Ethiopia, has been cited, that we have very many people who are registering as voters from those specific countries. That gives us something to worry. We also have an IEBC now that is presenting the figures that are just being put out. These are figures for the new voter registration. These are not the figures of the registered voters. But the way it's been put out is as though these are now the new percentages of voters, and confusing everybody. And nobody in IEBC is coming to say that there's a difference between percentage of new voters. So we're talking about this was the projection of voters, and these are how many who have registered. This is the percentage increment of the new voters. It is not all the voters. So we needed IEBC to quickly then put the figures from before to quickly address the many registered voters who are not finding their names, to quickly address the issue of double registration. Because as Kenyans, we're looking at the figures from Kiambu, for example, and saying, are these real figures, given even the population demographics, and given the rate of growth that is expected, and given the ratios that are there within a country? This is way beyond the national average. For a registration, it's at almost 55%, which is demographically impossible. It would be at about 35%. So all these figures that are coming out are figures that lack a lot of clarity. And now Kenyans are quickly putting all these figures together and working out NASA Jubilee strongholds and now making conclusions on information that is not being presented in the way it needs to be presented. We need IEBC to give us clarity that these are the new voters. We need this register to be cleaned, because given the way the registration was done, these figures need to be looked at in the light of double registration, in the light that you put your ID and all these, so many names come in the light of malpractices that happened within the registration process. Then we put these figures together with the 2012 and then work now the percentages, if we want, within the strongholds and the battlegrounds. We also need to have a clear sense of which counties are the NASA zones and which ones are the Jubilee zones. Because if you look at the presentation that has been given, there's a mix-up. Everybody is taking this to be, this is my stronghold, the other one to be a battleground, and there's no clear clarity about which county is fitting where. So I think whether or not the current IEBC are out, they're definitely much more in terms of the meddling that they're doing at IEBC than they ought to be.
So talking of zones, because yesterday also the Standard really carried out maybe it could be a shocker for you, that voters shock for NASA with hours to closure of mass voter registration. That was yesterday. New IEBC data shows less than half of eligible voters from opposition stronghold in Nyanza, Western and Ukambani registered. And also Kenyatta and Ruto backyard record high numbers, with some constituencies registering more than 300% new voters. Only Nyeri performed dismally among Jubilee counties.
But actually, if you looked at that thing carefully,
yes,
the headline was contradicted by the body of the information. Let me give you an example.
Yes.
Exactly what Agnes is saying. If you take Vihiga
just
County,
carry on.
Vihiga County has the highest density of population in Kenya.
Yes.
It's the most densely populated county in Kenya.
Yes.
And if you have to look at the figures which were registered in Vihiga before, and even if you take 42% target reached in Vihiga,
yes, that
42%, when you reduce it to actual numbers,
yes,
it's a very high number because of density of population in Vihiga.
Yes.
So that's one thing that the newspapers don't bring out. If you go to Nyeri, they say Nyeri has the lowest registration of voters. That depends on how many voters were registered in Nyeri already. I mean, the IEBC might have set a figure. Maybe if they say they expected 100,000 to be registered in Nyeri and only 20,000 then registered, then you would say that they have a low turnout in Nyeri. But Nyeri may already have a lot of voters registered. So I think, like Agnes said, these analysis to me is very superficial. Now, when you come to Kiambu, one thing that people must understand is that over the last 4 or 5 years, Kiambu has become a bedroom for Nairobi.
Yes.
If you only travel from Runda to Kiambu town, the number of high-rise apartments which have come up over the last 4 years and the number of people who have moved there makes the population increase. These are not children, these are adults, and these are voters. So makes the voter increase in Kiambu over the last 4 years perhaps one of the highest per capita. So, and they are not necessarily Jubilee voters. Kiambu has become a very cosmopolitan
lately, yes,
county. Now, the same is true with Kajiado. Kajiado is also extremely cosmopolitan. So when you begin zoning the country in terms of Jubilee zones and NASA zones, it only applies to very few counties, not the kind of analysis I saw in the papers. And finally, you know, the issues that are coming up in this coming election may shock people. I think we may be facing a kind of Trump-like situation where the voter behavior at election time may not necessarily follow strictly to past patterns.
Yes.
You know, that's something that any political scientist talking about these coming elections would tell the people who write these articles in the papers. I think they should be much more careful in their analysis than make general statements which are not necessarily supported by facts on the ground.
All right, and just to look at these figures especially, if we may just pick up the Standard, the Standard on Sunday, we have 228.40%, which is Kajiado. Let me just enlarge this so you can see it clearly. Kajiado has the highest number of new voters in the country, and 28%, the new votes in Vihiga County, the lowest in Kenya. Also 336.46, the record turnout in Kajiado East constituency, 24.09. Emuhaya constituency has the lowest turnout recorded. That is what we had also on the front page of the Standard yesterday. So was this a shocker to you? Did you do much of campaigning, especially in Emuhaya, Vihiga County, where we have the lowest turnout ever, I think, recorded in the history of this country?
I think Professor made it very clear when he spoke earlier that apart from the voter registration, there were key issues. You remember in Central, while already mechanisms for getting quick IDs had been put into place,
yes.
For example, Kiambu, that was not the case in Emuhaya. So where people should have been quickly moving into voter registration, they actually had to first deal with the issue of ID. And it wasn't as though it was seamless. It was really a question of quickly mobilizing. Some of these IDs had been taken to the different places instead of actually where they should have been. Leaders had to quickly coordinate and get these IDs and get them out. So that, to a large extent, really created that sort of a situation. And as I said earlier, we need these figures again to be vetted. And I think the case of Gambia is very, very clear. In the first instance, they had very high cases of voter registration in Gambia. But when they went now and actually audited the register, when they went to clean up the register, they removed all these cases of, for example, double registration. And they lost up to 1.5 million voter registered candidates, citizens at that time, who had actually been put there. So what I'm saying is that these figures need to be interrogated. They also need to be interrogated within a light of NASA Jubilee strongholds and really identifying which stronghold belongs to which coalition. Because I think that report has been given by Jubilee, and they have given themselves, for example, some strongholds that don't belong there. And we from NASA, for example, have also tabulated our own figures. And when you're looking at, for example, some of the strongholds, some areas like, for example, Mombasa, Kwale, Kilifi, Tana River, Machakos, Vihiga, Bungoma, Busia, Kiambu, this is Homa Bay, Migori, all fit into the NASA strongholds. We only have a battleground of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, about 9 counties. So the narrative yet is what I'm saying. The narrative is not clear. These figures have just come out from IEBC. We need for both sets of coalitions to sit within their coalitions, agree which other counties that actually belong to their battleground, those that support them, and then be able to work out that narrative. This narrative works out with actually NASA having more voter registered candidates than, for example, for Jubilee. But it all depends on which counties you put where. So when we go again into that analysis, we find it is statistically spurious, because even the agreement of which counties go where is not put into place. And then going again by what Professor said, it's not just according to the county. Might even have, for example, Meru for NASA having lots of people who are going to vote for NASA in, for example, Meru, in Kiambu. So we have to be able to realize that there are people who might be in a county, but when it comes to voting, they will actually vote for the coalition they think is the right coalition to be the ruling coalition.
All right, let's hear from Alice Ohome. First of all, from your own estimation, we're asking also our viewers, do you really hail the just concluded voter registration a success? From your own estimation, do you think it was a success?
I think I would say that considering the targets that we were expecting to meet as a country, I think we did not meet those targets, and therefore I wouldn't give it 100% pass. So it's because we just went slightly above 50%, and that's not good enough.
Yes.
The various reasons that contributed to those low numbers could actually be avoided in future. in terms of mobilization, I think politicians, elected leaders did very well because everybody felt it was necessary for us to actually assist in mobilization. It's not entirely our duty. Although, as I had said earlier, I think last week, that ordinary politicians, people looking for elective positions, and they know that the vote is actually the key instrument that will be needed for you to go through. Never keep away from the election cycle or the electoral cycle for that matter. So it wasn't successful in my view. I think the IEBC and of course the Ministry of Interior that oversees registration of persons need to up their game, and in future so that well, preparation in terms of issuance of ID is actually done properly and in conjunction with the IEBC work. However, we must remember that even on the day of voting, there will be a very big number of Kenyans turning 18. Soon thereafter, even tomorrow, today, there are people turning 18. So I think what we are saying is that we need to have an instrument, we need to have one card synchronized so that
a smart card, so
a smart card sort of, so that automatically when you attain 18, and of course so that we are closing our register, because there still has to be a deadline as to when you can actually be a voter, because you cannot wake up today and go tomorrow to vote, even if you have that smart card, because there are those preparations in terms of production and looking at the register, so that then, as you say, the audit is important. You need to know, as we go to vote tomorrow, for example, these are the number of votes that are expected to be cast. So there still has to be a cutoff point, even in future. But I think automatically having one smart card will ease off all these complaints, all these suspicions. And as I listen to my colleagues here, there were calls previously of different teams to mobilize their own vote regions where they feel their strongholds are based. And there was also indication, loud indications that elections will be won after registration of the numbers that we bring out. And I think,
so from that projection, you're
then
saying,
looking, and I don't think that is the Jubilee that was shouting that or making those statements. I think sometimes, you know, you can easily roast yourself with your own oil. I mean, there is a saying that you can.
So you think you think this voter registration is a bellwether?
I think we did better. From the Jubilee side, we did better in terms of voter mobilization. And let us, and it is not about the government assisting some areas more than others.
Excuse me.
People must agree.
All right. We need to respond also, just looking at the success of it. We had some kinks that needed to be ironed out, especially in Uganda. An MP that was discovered registering Ugandans. Right, this is a member of parliament from Teso as well. I don't know, what was your reaction from NASA side or CORD side in that regard, first of all, or you just let it pass and gloss over the issue?
You know,
what is happening?
You know, right from the beginning, and you remember it was actually our coalition that already said this out. First, we had the case of Ethiopia. Very many people, allegation, and people are coming from Ethiopia and they're actually doing, you know, registering as voters. Yes. Again, the same case for Uganda, basically from neighboring countries, and maybe from Tanzania, not so many cases coming from there, but definitely from this. And this was already something that was already out there that had been spoken about. I think the case of Mheshimiwa Mary Amase, who was, I think, the one who was allegedly had been in Uganda, yes, and had actually had her bodyguard arrested, and that she had managed to come to Kenya, basically was probably a case in point to show that there's a big problem. In fact, what is worrying me is that because of elections, we're going to have so many people getting quick IDs, so many people registering themselves, and it's going to be even a security issue for this country, that we have people who are not Kenyans who, yes, can easily come in, if it's from Ethiopia, into Kenya. And already we were on a tour and we went right up to Moyale. And these are already concerns, especially with cattle rustling that are coming up, that these people will quickly come into the country, steal take the cattle and go back, and you cannot get back to them. And it's worse if they already have identification. So again, it comes back to what I said earlier, that right from the beginning, the sort of figures we're looking at, and it's very good for Jubilee from their end to say, oh, these are the figures, look, this is what we expected, this is what we told you. But I said earlier that we need a thorough screening of these figures, including one, looking at our life and death register. And looking at the numbers of people who are born in this country, it's very easy to correlate these things. All you need to do is put all those current voters who have been registered and quickly run, because everybody in this country is registered when they are born. We can actually then quickly get out those who are not members of this country. And we won't be surprised that most of this cleaning will actually lead to a reduction of votes. For us at the moment, the numbers might be less, but we know these are actual numbers. And also that voter registration has not ended. We are coming to the end of a mass voter registration, but voter registration continues up to 2 months before the elections. So we can still have a chance to change these figures, and IEBC needs to be able to help us as we move along to actually be able to tabulate the correct figures and for us to be able to move on and still get, it's not a question of just putting in numbers, it's a question of putting in valid numbers. That when they're tested statistically across demography, across neighboring countries, having voters in there, across the natural growth pattern over time. Because what we should do is now do an analysis across the counties and see the progression in terms of new voters, even in terms of numbers demographically, and be able to see why we have such large margins in some counties.
We shall drill deeper into this issue, but let's hear from you, Dr. Shemachoda, then we continue with international news.
Yeah, thanks, Debal. In terms of voters cross borders, I think this is a little more complex issue that we are dealing with and may require its own law to look at how do we deal with Kenyans who are in the neighboring countries, because, you know, Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, Tanzania, these are all arbitrary boundaries that were created by the colonies. There's no denying that there are families across border, whether we are talking of Somalia and Kenya, and so on and so forth. So how to deal with this, I think, is an issue that cannot be just casually handled. It requires a little more thinking. But allow me also, Dr. Zani was very right when she talks of figures being bandied around by IEBC, that so many in this part of, in the constituency or county and so on. Even for diaspora, they were listing about 2,000. Yet we know very well diaspora have not been registered. Without clarifying, you wonder whether
2,000 without.
Yes.
Where were they getting the figures from?
That's a big question. Yes. Maybe somebody is trying to create a situation.
IEBC?
Yes. Yes. To justify, say, you know, we don't need to go to this diaspora because they are too few. So where did those 2,000 come from? So it's vital that an explanation is given. But also, Debal, as the mass voter registration ends, I want to take issue with the leadership of this country. I did appreciate that the Right Honorable former Prime Minister went to campaign in Meru and so on and so forth. But he didn't really go to central Kenya. By the same token, the president should have gone to what's called Luo Nyanza, also to mobilize voters. Otherwise, what messages are we sending to this country? I think in that regard, in my view, they stand accused.
Maybe he's bullish that, yeah, that's a given for him. Or why should he really spend his time? So he should go through the zones that he thinks he's not really made a crack. I
don't think so. As particularly for the president, you know, you are the symbol, national symbol. You're the president for everyone, whether Jubilee or CORD, NASA or Third Force or wherever, or diaspora. He should have gone everywhere. But also in the same token, the aspect of continuous registration, as Professor Nyong'o did share last time. You know, why have we not been registering this diaspora? I mean, there should have been registration provided for us in the law. The law requires there should be continuous registration. This has never happened. And this is particularly why my thinking, an appeal I want to make to the members of parliament. The most difficult thing to get from IEBC, and this reminds me of the telecom world, the most difficult thing to get from an operator is what we call paid minutes. How many million or billion paid minutes do they make per month? The same to IEBC. We have been asking, this diaspora you're saying is expensive to register. Can you give us the figures? For example, why does IEBC have to send 8 staff to Uganda, to Kampala? They probably could just send 2 people and then recruit Kenyans in Uganda to be returning officers. So my appeal to the members of parliament, when IEBC presents the bills, amendment bills, or even the regulations,
thank you,
they should put them to task.
Thank you.
Just very quickly.
Could we just do international? We'll come back. Right, so just a tender reminder on what we're asking you this morning. Do you think the just concluded mass voter registration, can you hail it a success? Do you think it was a success? It is on Twitter. AM Live NTV is a Twitter handle. AM Live NTV, a profile name on Facebook, and 20505 is our SMS portal at Twitter 2. Before we take a short break, just one of it, we have Abdi Rahman Ali saying IEBC has to present a clean voter registration and avoid mistrust. Let us work with IEBC 2. No blame game at all. Also, we have Governor Wa Mosobeti, voter registration law allows registration until 60 days before the election. Also, we have Katana here saying evidence of voting should be an added advantage in job interviews. Many lack motivation to vote. To vote, I should say. Thank you very much for your reactions. I can see the rush of tweets coming in. So just make sure you tweet in. Also, our Facebook page is AM Live NTV. Leaders from Baringo County are giving the county administration 2 days to conclude investigations and arrest suspects in Saturday's murders of 2 politicians. The ultimatum comes as leaders, professionals and locals from Tiati held a demonstration in Chemolongot Trading Center to protest the killings and demand the arrest of the assailants that murdered Frederick Kibet Charite from Loya Marok Ward and Jubilee parliamentary aspirant engineer Simon Pepe Kitamba at a club in Marigat town on Saturday. The Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission says it is waiting for its lawyers to advise it on how to proceed after High Court Judge Chacha Mwita ruled that voter registration will go on until May the 7th. The Commission has insisted that it needs to stop all registration early enough to allow it to inspect and clean up the voters' register. The law, however, allows Kenyans to register until 60 days before the election. Yesterday, however, marked the end of the mass voter registration, which has been going on for about a month now. Across borders, a blast from a suicide car bomb ripped through a market in the Somali capital Mogadishu on Sunday, killing 18 people and wounding at least 25 days after the country elected a new president. Casualties were confirmed by Ahmed Abdullah Afrax, the mayor of Wadajir, the district of the city where the bombing happened. Al-Shabaab, the Islamist insurgents group that is fighting the UN-backed Somali government, did not immediately claim responsibility. And Gambia's President Adama Barrow was sworn in on Saturday in a packed stadium in Bakau, west of the capital Banjul. The president took the oath 1 month after a ceremony held in the Gambian embassy in Dakar, Senegal, to legally swear him in since former leader Yahya Jammeh refused to leave office despite losing the December election. Let's take a cursory look at the dailies before we move on with the discussion. If you missed at the top of the hour the dailies or what is the headline in the front pages of the dailies today, this is it for you. The Daily Nation has this story. Angry voters await MPs in August poll. As for defectors, voters think they are greedy, selfish lot. According to survey, it's over 42% of voters say about the MP in new opinion poll, painting a somewhat grim picture for the future of the legislators, especially in Jubilee controlled areas where public dissatisfaction is most widespread. And you have a tabulation here. Let's just ask you, would you elect your MP? Nairobi, we have 19%, which is the grey, not sure. We have 49%, which is very likely. And you have 32%, which is not likely. In Nyanza, will you re-elect your MP? They have 49% very likely, 31% not unlikely, and 20% not sure. Also in Eastern, would you elect your MP, your current MP? You have 45% saying very likely they will. Also 37% not sure if they will. 18% not likely. We have Rift Valley, 37% very likely, 45% very or not likely, I should say, and 18% not sure. Western, 36% very likely, 44% not likely, 21% not sure. Also Northeastern, 35%, they say they're not They're very likely. 16% I'm not truly sure, and 50% not likely. Coast, we have 33% actually more or less, tallying on all segments of the pie. We have 33% saying they're very likely, 33% are not really likely, and 34% also they're not sure, which is a bigger margin of all two. Also, we have central, 60% not likely, right? And we have also 14% saying they're not sure, and 26% very likely. This is a shocker for central. Let's hear from Alice Wahome. She is a member of parliament from Kandara. So do you feel some heebie-jeebies? Heebie-jeebies as we're going on with this particular...
If you look at those quorums, and maybe what happens previously, a very big number of MPs are turned out, are not returned. In ordinary cases, more than 50% are not returned. Without making it personal in terms of whether I feel jittery signs or feelings, I think that Kenyans also have a problem in terms of retention of their members of parliament or elected leaders. And that could answer to the question of what expectations that most Kenyans have of the deliverables of what a member of parliament should actually do. In terms of representation, it is completely mistaken. In terms of oversight, they don't yet understand the new role that a member of parliament has, or even a senator. They would expect, for example, the senators to actually go with the development projects while they actually don't have money. Similarly with members of parliament, they really do not also have development money. And whatever is allocated, per se, is not anything to be able to meet the expectations.
But understanding roles
so in terms of central,
yes,
possibly the expectations in central, you look at it has the highest. It's where we need more awareness creation in terms of what they expect a member of parliament to do. And I think it's a disadvantage for a member of parliament who has done well and is not returned for reasons other than failure to deliver on their role.
But in terms
it's a loss to the Kenyan.
In terms of, as you say, maybe them understanding your roles, of course they don't really need to understand your roles. To them, what really translates to you being the member of parliament is the tangible deliverables. Right? If you relate to that, they can see, how much they feel your presence down on the ground. I think that was...
The deliverables for most Kenyans is actually not delivering on your own. If it is registration, no Kenyan is going to ask you at the grassroots, what have you done in parliament? Hardly. They want to hear you speaking, and they are actually proud to hear you speaking. Then in terms of oversight, it is a role that not is understood.
Okay.
In terms of representation, of course, presence on the ground, connecting with the people is key and is critical, but it is the expectation of cash rewards or awards that actually is overwhelming for most candidates and most aspirants and even members of parliament.
But you've got yourself to blame, isn't that the
no,
that you said?
I don't think so. Maybe to some extent also we have contributed to that kind of behavior from our voters, and therefore, on my part, I think that the use of money in our politics is not a good thing for Kenya.
Prof, before we took a short break, I thought you... Yes.
But I just want to make 2 points. One is about voter registration. There was a point that was made. I think what is important really is to learn from this experience. I don't want to get myself engaged whether Jubilee did better than CORD. That is neither here nor there. But to me, one of the most important lessons that I learned was that the state is letting people down. I said it last time.
Yes.
Article 1 and Article 2 of the Constitution are very important. And if the state cannot give its citizens IDs, like I found in Kisumu, that once we started the exercise, the majority of the people did not have IDs. That means that Article 1 and Article 2 of the Constitution are dishonored by the state. And this is a very serious matter. In fact, somebody can go to court and say that since the people were not given the opportunity to exercise their sovereignty, this election should not be held. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't. Because Article 1 says, all sovereign power belongs to the people of Kenya and shall be exercised only in accordance with this constitution. 2, the people may exercise this sovereign power, either directly or through their democratically elected representatives. How do you democratically elect your representative if you don't have an ID so as to get a voter card? And in my county, when we started this exercise, we found that the most important exercise to do is to get people to have ID. That is not my responsibility as a senator. That is a responsibility of the state.
Yes.
Nor is this a responsibility of Alice Wahome to go and mobilize people to go at ID, let alone to register as voters. That is the responsibility of IEBC. So for the state to wake up one day and tell us to go to the countryside and mobilize people to get ID and vote is state failure. Secondly, we are very much like the US after the civil rights. When the civil rights laws were passed, black people were given the freedom to vote for the first time after 100 years since independence. Although the US Constitution said that we hold these truths to be self-evident. All human beings are born equal. For 200 years, that article in the US Constitution was not being respected by the state. Finally, when they did it, there were so many hurdles to getting the vote that even up to now, Americans behave like us. When elections are approaching, they have to go to the countryside and begin mobilizing people to register as voters. That does not happen in Great Britain. It does not happen in Germany. It does not even happen in Singapore.
So is the IEBC doing a sloppy job?
No, not just IEBC. It is the state. IEBC is just an organ of the state.
But IEBC has a constitutional
That's what I'm
mandate.
saying. Before we even ask the IEBC to do its job, people must have IDs. IDs will be cut short from doing, but people not having IDs. And therefore, what we need to understand, if we are going to be a democracy, we should follow the example of Britain, Germany, Singapore, and not the US. We should make sure that the idea of voting is not a privilege given to a citizen. It is a right.
All right.
Me as a politician should not worry about people voting. I should just present myself to the people, Alice and I say, look, are you going to elect me or not? Not to find out whether they are capable of electing people. That is the duty of the state. And we have had it in our mind, the ball. Free your mind of thinking that is the duty of these politicians to go and hunt for people to register as voters. It's not our responsibility.
But
free your mind of that.
But the state really acts with machinery. You know, IEBC is a machinery.
I am telling you,
let
me make it clear.
Yes.
It is not the responsibility of IEBC to give people IDs. That is the registration of persons.
Yes.
That is the registration of persons.
Yes, yes.
And it is for the office of the president, the treasury, and so on to make sure that that department dealing with giving IDs has enough resources and does its job in time. Like Alice is saying, we should have one smart card. The moment I reach 18, the information is there in state machinery, which says the moment I reach 18, my name goes directly to the IEBC that now I'm now a voter. I don't even need to go to register. That is why this Jubilee government, it's called itself digital. It should have done these things for 4 years. Why is it digital when we are still going around the
But this
countryside?
conversation did not start even with the Jubilee administration.
No, I'm just saying, when it called it digital, that's one of the first time it should have done.
We are working on it.
Now let's look at the future.
Okay. So they're working on it, but they have their smart cards.
In any case,
the Jubilee smart card is already actually...
But the BAL, they're working on it. It's too late. But then Jubilee will not be there after the elections. So let us tell the next government to do what Jubilee has failed to do. So they should go home for having told Kenya a lie.
All right, so Jubilee has actually dismally failed. Yeah, we have the smart cards that you do have, which also is a bone of contention to so many people. They're saying they cannot truly access these particular cards as well. This particular conversation of having a smart ID was started also by the late Honorable Otieno Kajwang as well, because I remember also we had a session with him and he promised that he said, yes, it's in the pipeline that we'll have a smart card where we have all the confluence of, the institutions connected with the driving license.
I was in the cabinet then.
Yes.
Otieno Kajwang has a fantastic cabinet paper, and we costed it. Then Treasury said there was no money. It was Treasury which led Otieno Kajwang down. And when there was no money, it could not be done. So that's what I'm saying, it is state failure. You can have very good ideas as a minister, but if you don't have resources from Treasury, you can't do it.
Okay. Let's hear from Honorable Shem Ochodo.
Well, I think Professor Nyong'o has got an important point, the role of the state. In fact, it extends even to civic education. And Honorable Wahome is very right. You know, the Kenyan perception of what's the role of an MP, I think it's not the work of an MP to bring development. Actually, a representative has got 3 roles. The first one is representation. Yes. And to that extent, of course, they need to connect with the citizenry to be able to know what their concerns are to bring to the national government. The second one, of course, is legislation. We expect the MPs to come up with laws, motions, and so on and so forth, to legislate. The last one is oversight. None of those functions talk about development. And I think to that extent it's failure of state not to have provided sufficient civic education so that this thing that the people will elect only those who have brought development, which is wrong. But having said that, we cannot run away from Parliament also having failed. What does the Constitution say in Article 82, 1B? Sorry, 1C. It says, legislation on elections. Parliament shall enact legislation to provide for 1C, the continuous registration of citizens. While it's provided for in the Constitution, I've been asking, do we have a law on continuous registration? Secondly, in Article 82, 1E, which the IEBC has misused to deny diaspora rights to be registered to vote, says Parliament shall enact legislation to provide for the progressive registration of citizens residing outside Kenya and the progressive realization of their right to vote. As of today, there is no such law enacted by Parliament. So to be fair to Article 82...
what about the elections law?
No, that doesn't, not for the diaspora, for their registration. We needed one for their continuous registration and therefore progressive voting. It's only IEBC which has made an attempt to come up with the the diaspora voter policy. But that policy is more a draft. It has not gone through public scrutiny. But at one point, the CEO was calling it draft. The next moment, they were calling it official policy. But having said that, allow me also this talk of zoning the country. We are talking, I think we should be more concerned about why is it that in Kajiado there is 300 plus voter registration, while in somewhere like Vihiga it's less than 24%. What is it that's happening? Is it voter transportation from one place to Kajiado, importation or something? We need to interrogate, for me, rather than talking about zoning, which is wrong, because then we are playing into the hands of the tribalists. I think we should interrogate more why 300% versus 20%.
Okay, let's hear from Zani, then we come for...
thank you very much. And I think it's very important because I think a lot of emphasis has been put on the mass voter registration for a good reason, and that's where the emphasis has been. But in the Constitution, there is provision for continuous voter registration, which means we should be able to go on with voter registration. Sure. And this is in court. I think it was Tata who has just gone to court on this, and I think there's a ruling on this. Right. That continuous voter registration does continue per the Constitution and up to, I think, 2 months before the election. 60 days, 2 months before the election. So I think we can actually continue with this. But I think for me, what is interesting when I look at the statistics, I'm looking at Central with 60% not likely. That means they are the ones who are most disenfranchised about their leaders. But again, when you look again at the voter turnout and registration that we are being given, is that these actually have the highest number of registration, which would be unusual. Because what would you expect is that if you haven't been happy with the leaders that you've had, we'd have less intuition to go back into trying to bring them back to the fore. We have Central leading in that, and then we have Northern Eastern, and then we have Rift Valley. So I'm just emphasizing that it's important to be able to look at these statistics vis-a-vis the voter registration and the new numbers, and to actually be able to see what is really happening. Because that is a very, very big percentage. 60% is more than half of any of the other counties of a county that is already saying that they are not likely to get back their leaders. Yet, it is in this particular county again where we have the highest numbers of registration. We must be able to look to see that there's no sort of over-representation from any place, that these people who have been registered are actually all over 18, for example, and there is no anybody who is less than 18 who is already there. So already you can see, and this is the good thing about statistics, every time you look at statistics, you look at it from one point and you look at it from one point. That statistic there is glaring. 60%, none of the other counties has even up to about 30. This is a county with double the number that is saying that they will not actually bring back their members. But on the ID issue, I support that we need to be able to put into operation a system that right from the end of school, by the time people are getting their certificates and leaving schools, there should be already a system to put them into a database and for people to know that these people can be able to vote. And lastly, Dibal, just very quickly, because I wanted to say the last time, the figures again that we're getting from IEBC, and it was Shem who brought it up earlier, we already have a figure of about 2,000 people who are new voters who have been registered from the diaspora, when already diaspora registration has not taken place. So we need a clear explanation, because we are wondering where those figures are coming from. They are not figures of people in the diaspora who have a potential to vote. And that's another statistic we need. We need to have a figure of the diaspora who can actually vote. We know maybe some might not have a passport, but we need to be able to
Could we be having a linkage maybe to what also the allegations that were coming also from the opposition, first of all, from even the better part of last year, that there was a ID issuing that was being actually done from the American consulate. Right now we have 2,000 who have registered. Could this also be the possibility that these IDs which were being issued last year by the American consulate, by the Kenyan, Kenyan consulate in America, could this have translated to the, let's hear from Alice.
Dipal, I think that question shouldn't even be directed to me, because that's a very, it's a very technical question. I don't, for me, I think when every Kenyan, whether they are inside Kenya or outside, is entitled to the normal national documents, that is the ID and the passport. So
but should it be the onus of course of
the consulates issue passports. The consulates issue passports. So which means actually, even with the passport, you can correct your voter registration.
But what we were talking about was the ID.
The curious thing would be...
We had the ambassador actually doing this particular job of issuing.
Let me say, the curious thing would be to particularize it in one particular station or one particular country. There has to be a public information as to where we are doing it and why, and not elsewhere.
Okay.
I could assist on this one, Debal. In March last year, the Kenya Diaspora Alliance, in collaboration with the embassy in Washington, D.C., in fact, including the ambassador himself, Ambassador Githai, we did facilitate for 4 staff to go from Washington, D.C. to Las Vegas. Those conversant with the U.S. know the highest assembly of Kenyans normally happens the first week of March in Las Vegas, when there is Vegas 7th. In fact, later this, at the beginning of next month, we already anticipating a case where there'll be 10 to 15,000 Kenyans assembled in one place. So last year we did facilitate for 4 immigration officers to travel, to issue IDs. In this regard, I want to exonerate any blame, particularly issuing of IDs is a right to every citizen. In fact, even that last year we did make an offer with our private sector partners to IEBC. We said, because it happens to have coincided with the last mass voter registration, we said, why don't we would facilitate for your people to go to Las Vegas. There are already 15,000 people, many of whom we would want to believe are eligible. But of course, you would know eligibility. You tell them, you come with your passports or IDs. If you have them, if you're a Kenyan and you want to register. But IEBC declined that offer. The same, we know that next month, this is going to happen again. If I were IEBC, or if I was IEBC, I would have taken the advantage to register Kenyans also in the US. In fact, as we go back to court, 2 major countries were very keen on, which the only thing which would stop us going back to court is if the United States, Kenyans in the US, and Kenyans in the UK are also included. Short of that, we would go. But in terms of, it's vital to recognize that there was a difference between what the embassies were doing. Embassies don't have a mandate to issue voters' cards.
Yes, they don't.
They don't have the mandate.
Can I give some information?
Can we hear from Farah before we let you, Prof, because I know also you are about to leave. Farah, good morning to you.
Morning to you. Sorry.
What happened today? There was traffic.
Usual excuses.
All right.
Every Kenyan who comes late is caught up in traffic. Okay. Dibal.
Yes.
As long as there's utmost good faith.
Yes.
There's something.
Yeah, don't worry, we'll sort it out. I think there's a problem with the internal speaker. So just continue.
As long as there's utmost good faith, on the part of the government and an enlightened and very vigilant population, things have a tendency of going right. We ID card issuance, whether it's going to be done in a single card or whether it's going to be done separately, is something that the government can do it and every Kenyan can be registered with minimum delays, minimum fuss. I remember we had situations in which people would be waiting for the ID cards for 3 years, for 4 years in Northeastern Province. And people got the ID cards in a week now. When the directive was given by the president last time,
Yes.
so many people who had the ID cards and applications sitting out there and who had not been issued by ID card were given. It's massive numbers of Kenyans who qualified for their own ID cards, who are bona fide Kenyans, who were frustrated for years, got the chance now to finally have a paper that they can show off when the police stop them and ask them for identification instead of just showing the waiting card. My position is very simple. As long as there is no hanky-panky business, which of course is in a big way, both issuance of ID cards should be very easy and should not be selective, and every Kenyan should have it wherever they are. And the access to registration also as voters can be a continuous thing up to the last minute.
Yeah.
If we can have 25 million Kenyans accessing M-Pesa probably at the same time, and you have a system that essentially is able to flawlessly do that, what is 18,000 Kenyan voters? In terms, 18 million Kenyan voters. But now we have multiplicity. I was reading in Mwai Kibaki's number. There are 8 people who are registered as voters on the same ID card as Mwai Kibaki. I'm told the same also happens with Moi and many other people. Of course, mine is not registered.
But IEBC, they've acknowledged, yes, there was an
it's
anomaly
not
with
an acknowledgement. Why did it happen? This is the point I'm telling you. With the system you have, which is foolproof, why did it happen?
But they've not said it is foolproof. Where did they give a disclaimer is
there
foolproof?
are so many ID cards, fake ID cards that have been given to people, and people are going to vote 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, maybe some of them 10 times. That is the position we have right now. That is the position Kenyans are running away from. What is happening right now is we are not likely to have a free and fair elections because there will be 1 million or 2 million votes that do not reflect people who will be voting 3, 4, 5 times.
But we must be appreciative of the fact that, yes, they've seen, there is a problem.
Yes, they have seen it, but, you know, it's not enough to say just we have seen it. I mean, it's an ID, for God's sake. I mean, just go into your internet right now and try and change your own email address. This global thing that has probably 5 billion Kenyans is able to tell you within seconds that this ID, this internet address is registered on somebody else.
All right.
You see what I mean? Okay. Why should it become possible in the first place for an ID number to be allocated twice?
Thank you. Let's leave it at that and hear from Prof. because it's about to leave us.
Thing before I go. First, the Elections Act 2012, Article 5 says registration of voters. Registration of voters and revision of the register of voters under this act shall be carried out at all times, except there's exceptions dealing with general elections and so on, but at all times. Then it says in Article 5.3, and this is where I want to bring this to the attention of my friend Shemo Chula, any citizen, he didn't say anywhere, any citizen of Kenya who has attained the age of 18 years, as evidenced by either national identity card, you see there the identity card comes in, as evidenced by the other national identity card, or a Kenyan passport, which means these 2 documents are right of Kenya. They're not a privilege.
Right.
And whose name is not in the register of voters shall be registered as a voter upon application in the prescribed manner to the Commission. So, it's the Commission to come out with a prescribed manner for voter registration. It's not Parliament. The Commission is given these powers by the Constitution, by this Act. So it is the Commission who should come up with a method of registering Diaspora. Because the Act is already there. They don't wait for another law. The Act was passed by Parliament in 2012. So all these excuses that they are being bandied around is ignorance of the law. Right. And Parliament cannot be held responsible for the failure of IEBC because we passed the law in 2012. And it's very clear here.
Right. We need to move on.
I think a correction on that, Debal. Yeah. I think maybe Prof will need to refer also to Article 37 of the electoral regulations. Yeah. That's the one that says Kenyan diaspora will require a passport, a valid passport to be registered. And that was passed, approved by Parliament. So that's where really I have a bone.
So this is where we are saying lacunas.
Is unconstitutional and it's also against the electoral laws.
Okay, before you leave, because also there's a new development here with the party hopping, and he talks of that particular lacuna that you're having with the electoral law that is clashing. Also, we discovered also with the election laws that you passed, there's still a lacuna for MPs they have a window to actually party hop so far. So how comes this also lacuna was not envisaged by some of the legislators, that we have this in the law, still we've passed the election law, but still there is window also for MPs.
Well, the thing is that lawmaking is a continuous process, and Parliament is still in session, and there is nothing stopping Parliament from looking at these conflicts in laws and tidying them up.
Right.
I mean, in as much as the IEBC should also clean the register, Parliament should also make sure that where the law is making it difficult for citizens, they should clean that. But one more thing, which is very important as a parliamentary, I must say, one more thing, whatever law is made, it is not contradict the Constitution.
Correct.
The Constitution is the basic document. Whether political party leaders want one thing or the other, in the final analysis, they must be respectful of the Constitution. In as much as I said that the state must respect the Constitution, other political actors must also respect the Constitution. True. So you may find that these lacunas in law is perhaps because some constitutional principles were not looked at very carefully.
That's exactly how it is.
All right. And just to lay a basis for our viewers to understand all this lacuna that we're talking about. President Uhuru Kenyatta and the opposition chief Raila Odinga, it says, plan to curb party hopping in August polls and is likely to be dealt a blow by a loophole in the Constitution and the subsidiary electoral laws. Political parties, aspirants contesting for various seats in the primary set by the electoral body for April have a chance to maximize on an open, and it continues on page 6. Allow me just to flip over there for you to see it, what it reads on page 6 of the Daily Nation, of the Standard. New lifeline for MPs over party hopping. Open window between it and that of the independent candidates as stipulated under Article 85 of the Constitution, lawyers who spoke to the Standard say. That is the story. Could we comment about on this, then we move on with our discussion this morning? Let's first of all hear from also a consummate lawyer. Alice Wahome, she's been fairly quiet on this.
Actually, I'm not for party hopping myself. The last 3 months to the general election, a candidate is required to either be an independent candidate or a member of a political party as the sponsor of your candidacy. So if then within those, before 3 months, you actually have a leeway to choose.
Yes.
And that is the lacuna or the conflict that exists. Sure. That if I, for example, am subjected to nominations through the elections laws, 3.5 months, that means in April, anytime in April, because the deadline set by the IEBC are between 13th of April and 26th of April for parties to carry out their primaries. It means after 26, between 26th and 8th of May, there is like, I think, 2 weeks, within which then the Constitution doesn't bar you to be a candidate into any elections, and you can decide within that period. So that's where we are saying, and if a subsidiary or if a law or a statute is in conflict with the Constitution, then obviously the interpretation is that the Constitution suffices and it's the supreme law. So the law will be rendered useless. And I think maybe that was an oversight in terms of, but not really an oversight. We've already started hearing that the parties are likely to move their nominations from April to actually just before 8th.
All right, and
Yes.
that is what I want to discuss, these
Yes.
nominations as we're winding
Yes.
up, unless you have, you don't need to belabor this point, do you? Right, let's move on first of all and just talk about especially these nominations, the party primaries that will be coming. And I'm given to understand also NASA is on the horn of dilemma on whether to hold joint nominations or allow a party to conduct their primaries and field candidates during the general election. Is that so?
The position for that will be made clearer as the committee winds up its work. So at this moment, we are looking at all these various scenarios, and when the right time comes, we're going to give exact direction as to how that is going to happen within our coalition setup. Within a party setup, the structures are already put into place, for example, in ODM in terms of how the nominations are going to be conducted. But we need the space, especially for the committee that is working for the NASA coalition, to be able to stipulate that. But I think going back to the party hopping law, I think it was focusing on the problems that happen from one party to another, especially where there has been a party hopper moving from one party into another party, and therefore changing the dynamics as they move to that party. The bit about the independent candidate had not been really taken into consideration, and that leaves a space for somebody to be able to move into.
And so this, it seems there will be people, jumping ship, especially from the big parties or the coalitions, as it were, to small parties and independents as well.
But I think the most important thing is the timelines for doing that, so that it doesn't cause disorganization.
You see what the law says is that any person is eligible to stand as, that is Article 85,
Correct.
as an independent candidate for election if the person, one or A, is not a member of a registered political party.
Right.
And has not been a member
3 months.
for at least 3 months.
Correct.
Immediately before. So the cutoff point is 3 months immediately before the election date, and that is 8th of May. So I could be a member of a political party on 30th of April or before 8th May. So, and then I move, because what you need to move from your political party is actually write to your party and then forward that letter to the registrar of political parties, who will then enter the withdrawal of your name from the register of that political party. Then you can forward your name as an independent candidate.
And Farah, you on record, you admitting that NASA has not solved the nominations nightmare ahead of the requirement to start submitting rules to IEBC today.
On this one of abusing freedoms?
Of
abusing freedoms.
Let's hear from Farah, then we'll come to you, Dr. Shem.
No, I mean, Agnes has put it very well. We serve in the same, we're in the same committee with Agnes, the NCC.
So what are the nightmares?
There are no nightmares. There are no nightmares.
But you on record here saying you've not solved nominations nightmare ahead of requirements.
No.
We don't even want to go into the media assertions, because from whom?
So he should tell us what these nightmares are. I want to know what these nightmares are that you are on record saying they are nightmares.
When you are with two ladies,
when
you are with two ladies, one of them is an academic and the other one is an advocate of the High Court, and then a member of Parliament. In both cases, a lot of talking involved, and you have Shem Ochodo, who represents, global diaspora. So with all the time zone differences, talks all the time. I can't have a chance myself to say anything. But let me tell you something.
You're being diplomatic with this nightmare.
No, there's no nightmare. Let me be honest with you. It's just that we haven't disposed of that particular issue. It does not actually come to our discussion yet. We're dealing with other preliminary issues. So we'll come to discuss it as a committee, and we'll come up with a solution for that.
Okay, let's hear from
So
Shem
all
quickly.
the speculations in the media is pure speculations. I mean, it has no basis, absolutely.
So you think this nightmare was just picked
They
randomly
haven't
from...
finished the NASA marriage pact.
Look, the marriage...
And before they do that, then you cannot arrange nominations.
Dibal. We have others who have finished the marriage and they're now nearly going to divorce with really blows blowing because of this rushed marriage, which is a terrible marriage. We are organizing for a very good marriage of people who love each other, and we have said we are now at the courtship period. Can we be allowed to court, to finalize and to let people know in
without
our
nightmares.
own time? Without.
Okay.
So with that, the marriage, the regulations, the rules, the
Will all be
housekeeping have not been
Will all be
finalized. So when
there.
you ask the question of their primaries, they will be determined by the outfit they come up with.
Okay, let's hear from Dr. Shem.
I'm a worried person. For those of us who belong neither to Jubilee or NASA, and there are many Kenyans in that category, I'm a worried person because these two major coalitions are trying to take us back to the days of single party. They basically, by this new amendment, which I'm glad there's a lifeline for those representatives who want to bolt. Article 38 of the Constitution, the freedom, the political rights,
yes,
says every citizen is free to make political choices, which include the right, A, to form, but B, particular one, to participate in the activities of or recruit members of a political party. That's the right that the people in parliament, particularly the two coalitions, because it was in their interest to block out so-called defectors. I am glad there is this lifeline and window that's available. Mm-hmm. But more importantly, I'm concerned that no Kenyan went to court to challenge that law, which itself is unconstitutional. So I'm glad there is a lifeline, but looking at it more seriously, for my colleagues here, for some of us who have been in major political parties, the freedoms of assembly have come so painstakingly to Kenyans that you don't want to claw them back.
All right. So are your rules ready?
No, I think that has been put very well by Alice. At the end of the day, it's the Constitution that's going to reign supreme.
Okay.
So whatever this party leaders and other people want, at the end of the day, it's the Constitution that's going to reign supreme. And I don't think party hopping is a thing of the past. Party hopping is going to be there with us. Somebody will go to court.
Okay.
Yeah,
so is it also back to the drawing board for the Jubilee party as well? Because we understand earlier on we indicated that IEBC will run your primaries. Right now they are showing to be non-committal on this. So what next for the Jubilee party?
The party is committed to allowing IEBC to actually run our primaries.
But they have
but
shown
the IEBC I believe is reluctant for maybe obvious reasons. And of course, the NASA people do not want that to happen because, you know, they've always conducted very messy. Actually, in terms of ratio.
How do they not want you to have your...
They have raised objection, is it called the OPIO? Wandai is already raising issues. Saying that IEBC should actually not be allowed. Of course, there are questions of funding, and I think that is a relevant point, whether we have provided money and under what law we shall be able to provide funds to IEBC to be able to conduct our nominations. Because really, the primaries is part of elections.
Yes,
so Kenyans are entitled to the right candidates for nomination.
But that is a party issue, isn't it?
And it's a party issue, but let me tell you, Dibar,
with your own financing.
With the wrong candidates and mishandling of nominations, right. Kenyans don't get free and fair elections, and they don't get the candidates of their choice.
But that should not be a trot excuse that now you should actually go to, to the public funding, to the treasury to draw money.
There is nothing wrong. Electioneering is a major activity of Kenya. And therefore, going to the public funding is
money, not... No, public funding has not been budgeted for
political
with the
parties
IEBC
are actually being funded by the Kenyans under the law.
Yes, it is true.
Yeah, it's the only specific item that we haven't provided. And you see, budgeting is not everything that is in the budget is actually prescribed under the law. Those are items under the election items. You can put party primaries as long as also parties agree, because again, the parties should agree. Constitutionally, actually, the law of supervising nominations by IEBC has been given that by the Constitution. It's not something we are borrowing outside the Constitution. So from that extent, you cannot be given a role or an activity, a mandate, that is not funded. I think that is from the premises that we are actually moving.
All right. Agnes, you had some...
Yeah, I had something to say. First, the idea that political parties are meant to be funded is true. It's there on paper, but political parties, at least the ODM, has not received the 0.3% that they're meant to be given. And this is part of
this is
the
5 years down the line.
This is 5 years down the line. So that money has not been put in there. So again, that also has implication we will find our ways of having the money like any party would need to. But I think it is wrong for us to say that political parties have this money, but that money has not been distributed. So that creates, one, a very big problem. Two, the objection that has been raised by Wandai is an objection. But the reality really comes to what IEBC itself is saying. And I think going by what Raphael Tuju is saying here is that IEBC has not complained about it. IEBC yesterday was on press conference saying very clearly that given their timelines, given all that they're expected to do, they cannot be able to actually go into carrying out nominations for specific parties. And I think part of the political party structure is to ensure that there is a proper national election board within those political parties, that board should be funded, as I have said, from the political parties fund, and they should be able to conduct their elections. And at any time, if, for example, any money is going to be given for that, for the political parties to do it, then the money has to be given to all political parties and not to specific political parties where others don't have that funding to be able to conduct those elections properly.
Yes.
Actually, it's Article 88(4) of the Constitution of the powers of the IEBC. Yes. It says the Commission is responsible for conducting or supervising elections to any elective body or office established by this Constitution. And that includes political parties. I'm a bit surprised that the NASA, particularly the ODM, that's not received funding, I thought it would have been the first one to say, well, let IEBC take care of our nominations. But there's an underlying problem. And personally, I've been a victim of unfair nominations and the hawking of certificates. So that's really the true reason why they're opposed to IEBC looking after nominations.
Because they still want to carry the same behavior.
Practice. And maybe just a little caution to my friends. When the going is still good, they love it. But one day soon tables will turn around. These are the things I used to tell Miguna, Odu Oluwalo, Owalo, and so on. You know, when they're on the other side, they forget. The one thing, the single denominator that never changes is justice and fairness. That's what we should all fight.
Okay, let's hear from Farah.
No. Let me now tell you one thing that you need to know. IEBC has no business being involved in political parties' internal dynamics. IEBC is the independent electoral and boundaries commission to conduct national elections. National elections. Political parties are private clubs. By the way, let me tell you, political parties are private clubs. So you cannot use a national agency, a state agency, to run the affairs of a political party. Supposing there are litigations that come out of it, who's going to be taken to court? IEBC? If in the nomination of a member of parliament for Kisumu Rural, there is a litigation from one of the contestants for the nominations that he feels he has been wrongly basically has been, stolen. His own nomination has been stolen. What happens? Would he take IEBC to court for having carried out these elections the manner they carried out? No. Parties, whatever, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. All over the world, I mean, these things happen. Parties are political. There's no local standard for the parties to be involved.
But even
hang on a minute.
Oh, yes.
There's no local standard. There's no local standard for the parties to be involved, for IEBC to be involved in the internal dynamics of a party itself. So can I just finish? You are always in a hurry to say things, and all the time you're talking and you're not making even any clearer. But let me just tell you one thing. You can't have a state agency, which is a national body, which is supposed to have the credibility to conduct these things, and if ever in the unlikely circumstances there are petitions, they become the first respondents, by the way. Imagine having them as the first respondents in the internal. How many parties do you have? 47 political parties. If it has to conduct the nomination for one, it will have to conduct for the other 46 also.
Yes.
It carries out for 47 political parties. Just imagine the kind of litigation that will be there. In any case, what is the interest of IEBC, this national body itself, in the internal dynamics of a political party?
But there's a provision in the law.
Let me explain.
There's a provision in the law for that.
Allow me
that provision.
because let us not misinform Kenyans.
Yes, true.
I think The provision in the Constitution is very clear.
Article what?
And
Which
FARA, Article 88, Article 4. FARA is talking from the previous positions before the passing of the Constitution, where political parties were clubs and private enterprises for certain individuals in this country. And in fact, that time, they were also being funded mainly by individuals. But when we also agreed that political parties should be funded from the taxpayer, it was so that we can actually strengthen and deepen democracy, internal democracy of political parties. Of course, it hasn't happened very well. So this sub-article 4 says the commission is responsible for conducting or supervising referenda and elections of any elective body, all office established by this constitution.
Thank you.
So remember, the parliamentary elections are established by the Constitution, and political parties offices, and any other elections as prescribed by an act of parliament, and in particular continuous registration and all those other activities. It goes further to actually say it will facilitate the observation and monitoring and evaluation of all those elections. You can evaluate, you can even give a report and indict a political party in terms of how it conducted, even if it is not IEBC. So the choice is not really so much of the IEBC, it is of the political party. It's not, however, mandatory. The political party is supposed to request, make a request, a formal request. We, as a party, we have made a formal request. And the reason that informed that, because even our national delegates has agreed and passed a resolution, was to avoid this gymnastics that occur. The men in black, the women in red, you know, all these things will come during the nominations. And of course, party certificate becomes a very valuable document where people sell. They actually go hawking.
All right, we should be winding up, I think.
Can I say something?
Just a moment. Let's hear from Zani.
To look at the reality. Because we have one situation, what we have in the Constitution, and a choice to be made, but we have a reality. We are 5 months into an election where IEBC itself is definitely not yet in ready mode, with a lot to put into place. And it was Chebukati yesterday who said it himself very, very clearly, and I heard him, that we're not yet in that position. Number 2, we need to have a clear trajectory that will be put about who then will arbitrate. Because remember, there'll have to be arbitration. That arbitration has to be done by IEBC. So what will happen in that instance within a very short time? And it might be an interested party as well. So I think the scenario here, again, we go back to what the Constitution has, with also preparation in terms of timelines. This would have been an assertion that would have been made earlier, so that other political parties can also make their decisions, or say, for example, we want to conduct our own elections, but the same funding that would be given by IEBC to a political party can also be given for other parties to be able to conduct their own elections.
As you're winding up, let me just hover that on that particular. But why actually is ODM really going full steam ahead to declare a candidate, especially from Garissa Township, right? We have Nasir Dolal, who has been fronted by...
but this is a person... I mean,
just a moment. Just a moment. Because first of all, we understand the nominations have not even happened in the first place.
Yeah, but you see...
So we have Nasir Dolal has been now, so to speak, anointed for this particular seat.
This is the thing.
We have the NASA coalition. Farah is here. He's a deputy leader of a Wiper party. Why then do you do this? And you've not really have the nominations yet.
But you see, exactly. And the nominations have not been held. And that's what we are saying. It doesn't stop somebody from coming up and saying, I'm interested in this seat. Everybody's doing that. Even in Kwale County now, we're finding people...
So you have not unveiled the candidates?
Nominations are coming. After nominations, we'll be able to then say who is actually the ticket barrier.
Just a moment. Who is projecting Nasir Dolal as the nominated
You tell
candidate?
Me, because you're the one who is saying that he's been projected.
He's been unveiled as a party leader, according
like
to
all
news
other
media.
aspirants would be unveiled. We had Makwere being unveiled in Kwale.
All right.
People are still discussing that.
Let him defend himself.
So
just a moment. So do you know this development? Can you tell us this Nasir Dolal? Farah, briefly, we are winding up.
Yeah, Nasir.
He should also tell us that's why he left the ODM party.
Yeah, this could be the reason.
Coalition.
Okay, briefly, sir, we are winding up. We've got only a minute to go.
I am not at liberty to discuss the internal dynamics of the coalition itself. Can you, people, hold on? As soon as I open my mouth, there's somebody who's jumping up and down and I'm talking. Just relax. You've been talking the whole day. I've just talked for once.
But you came late.
Yeah,
let
me now explain.
You came late as well.
Can you give me a few minutes so I can
Then
clear
we're winding
this
up. We go 30 seconds according to my director. Just be winding up in 30 seconds.
Those are internal, what do you call, coalition dynamics, so don't bother with them. And if anybody is celebrating, they'll be disappointed. That's it, will be taken by the coalition, and there will be no conflict within the coalition. Now, the other bit I want to come to is that, look, the principal role of the IEBC itself is here. The commission is responsible for conducting or supervising referenda and elections to any elective body or office established by the Constitution. And any other elections as prescribed by an act of parliament, and in particular, and then it shows all these things. Sometimes the provisions of this article, one article could be in conflict with the other. But then in law, Agnes will tell you the one which precedes always takes precedence over the other. But whatever it is, the point I'm telling you right now is that it's not possible for IEBC to be involved in internal party dynamics. I think this is something we will grow with. Now,
let's leave it at that. Thank you very much. We are really strapped for time.
We need an insight on the functioning structures. If IBC is not going to conduct elections for coalitions, who hoped it would?
It's only regulatory. It can only set the rules. You know what I mean? That's why it says regulating. It approves the entire. You see, when you come with your own nomination rules, you take it to them and it approves that nomination.
Thank you.
Rules.
Thank you.
It is a regulatory body.
We'll continue with this next week, sir. Thank you very much, Agnes. I really do appreciate. Alice, I know you want to give your closing remarks, but my director, she's on my case as well. We need to wind up. This is an ongoing exercise. Of course, we'll talk about nominations next week, where we know yours is on the 20th, the nominations, isn't it? Right, fine. Thank you. We'll carry on that next week. So we'll leave you with this quote of the day, and it's all about political parties and primaries. Abraham Lincoln will say, the ballot is stronger than the bullet. The ballot is stronger than the bullet. Of course, we know what happened also in Baringo as well, and that comes in very aptly. Thank you very much for your valued company. Kobe Kerash is up next.